How did these fallen angels play a part in the Nephilim giants of Genesis chapter 6? Who were the Nephilim? How did their existence impact the world around them? How does this still affect us today? The Nephilim was first mentioned in Genesis chapter 6. Here we see they were a hybrid creation between the Watchers and human women. The Watchers were angels that were dispatched to earth to watch over the humans. They soon begin to lust for human women. These angels and their offspring not only fills chapters of biblical text, but extra-biblical as well, including the Book of Enoch. First Book of Enoch devotes much of its attention to the fall of the Watchers. The second Book of Enoch addresses the Watchers who are in fifth heaven where the fall took place. The third Book of Enoch gives attention to the unfallen Watchers. The fall of the Watchers, in which they left their first estate to be with the human women, have long and profound implications throughout history, not only in regions of the Middle East. If we look at the long-lasting effect, we can start to see that the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim became what has been known as demons or unclean spirits. In addition to Enoch, the Book of Jubilees 7 also states that ridding the earth of these Nephilim was one of God's purposes for flooding the earth in Noah's time. They were in the earth before and after the flood. There were giants in the earth in those days before the flood or great deluge, and also after that the flood, stating Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. Essentially, his blood was pure of any cross-hybridization of the Nephilim bloodlines that corrupted the earth of that day, and through that, Noah found grace in the sight of God. We also see potential Nephilim popping up in other cultures as well. The pantheon of Greek mythology with the Titans, to the giants of the north in Nordic mythology, to mighty men that were of old, the men of renown as quoted from Genesis chapter 6 verse 4, which could denote the creation of other gods and entire separate religious systems. Even kings such as King Nimrod, a giant man considered the leader of those who built the Tower of Babel in the land of Shinar, a hubristic act of defiance against God ordered by the arrogant tyrant, done in rebellion to the masterful plan God had laid out to redeem his people, but more on him later. The Nephilim, as mentioned in Genesis chapter 6 and also supported by Numbers chapter 13, are believed to have existed both before and after the flood. Similarly, the Emites, the Ammonites also known as Anakites, and the Rephaim, mentioned in Deuteronomy chapter 2, are thought to have emerged after the flood as distinct entities, although they share similarities in appearance, as noted by the chronicler's use of the phrase like, the Anakim are believed to have descended from the Nephilim. Despite similarities, the Rephaim are considered to be separate from the Nephilim in terms of their familial lineage. Deuteronomy chapter 2 also indicates that the Rephaim were largely subdued by the Ammonites, who then inhabited their territories. Also, we must not forget the giant from the Philistine army that David slew, Goliath. He was a giant after the flood, and his brothers, David and the kingdom of Israel, waged many wars against tribes of people whom, if you look at the text in context, were of Nephilim descent, one being the Anakim, aboriginal giants reported in the Old Testament to have inhabited southern Palestine before the Hebrews entered the land and virtually annihilated them, to clear the area of the promised land betrothed to the Israeli people by God of this hybrid offspring. Joshua finally expelled the Anakim from the land, except for some who found a refuge in the Philistine cities of Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. But before we get ahead of ourselves, we need to go back to Genesis chapter 3. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Essentially, the Nephilim was an attempt to wipe out any chance of a Messiah coming into the world by these fallen watchers to completely corrupt Adam's bloodlines. And if you look at Noah and follow his lineage back, you will see that it goes directly to the bloodline of Seth, which is the son of Adam, and Noah, being blameless in his generations, and being a righteous man, put him in a position for God to use his family for the continuation of the Adamic bloodline to Christ. Not to mention, in the early turn of the century in the Ohio River Valley, there were hundreds of burial grounds that were discovered that entombed remarkably tall and large individuals, 9 to 14 feet tall, sometimes more. A lot of information is still available on that through newspaper archives, as well as a great couple of books written by Dr. Zimmerman and others on the subject. The area I live in here in the Midwest was riddled with these types of burial grounds which held remains of giants. Many towns and epicenters, having been erected in close proximity or directly on top of some of these ancient sites, Our town cemetery was built on the biggest burial mound in the area. Wild if you think about it. Interestingly enough, there was a group of Indians in the southern part of my county known as the giant red-haired cannibals. But I digress. But when giant remains like this are found, the archaeological department of the Smithsonian Institute was fast at work collecting these remains and then locking them away in secrecy, never to be seen again. Luckily, many news articles were written when these remains were found and litter the archives of many historical societies and article databases that can still be found today, information concerning what grave contents they were buried with, measurements, and some commentary still exist today.